Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're setting our sights on Kenya.
Yeah, Kenya. Always a fascinating one to explore.
Definitely. I mean, it's got it all: ancient history, landscapes that belong on postcards, you name it. And today, we're taking you on a whirlwind tour of this East African nation, all thanks to the wonder that is Wikipedia.
And believe me, there's a lot more to unearth than you might expect.
Oh, I bet. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's set the stage a bit, for anyone who might just be dipping their toes into learning about Kenya.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like when you picture Kenya, what comes to mind?
Okay, so my brain immediately goes to those incredible safari scenes, with the vast savanna, the lions, the whole 9 yards. And of course, you can't forget the Masai Mara, right?
Right. It's iconic for a reason. But Kenya, my friend, is so much more than just safaris. It's a country of incredible diversity.
Oh, I've heard that. And I'm ready to dig deeper, but where do we even begin?
How about with the land itself? Kenya's geography is incredibly varied, from cool highlands to sun-kissed coastlines, and yes, even deserts. We're talking a whole lot of variety packed into one country.
Wow, I seriously had no idea. So it's not just the wildlife that's diverse, we're talking about the actual landscapes too.
Exactly. And this geographical diversity isn't just for show. It influences everything from the climate to what can be grown, which of course impacts where people settle and how they live.
That makes total sense. It's like the land itself shapes the human story.
Precisely. It's interconnected, you see. For instance, the highlands, with their fertile soil, have been agricultural heartlands for centuries. Meanwhile, head north, and the drier climate has led to a more nomadic, pastoral way of life.
Wow, you're right. It's all connected. Okay, so we've got stunning scenery and a human story interwoven with the land. What else? What about Kenya's history? It goes way back, right?
Way back. I mean, we're talking early human ancestors here. Discoveries like the Turkana boy and nearly complete Homo erectus skeleton have cemented East Africa, especially Kenya, as a crucial location in understanding our own evolution.
No way. That just blows my mind to think those discoveries are happening there. Okay, so we're talking about a place where humanity, took its first steps. And then on top of that, it wasn't just one group or civilization that came to call Kenya home, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are waves of migration, each leaving their own mark.
Exactly. We're talking Cushitic, Nilotic, Bantu migrations, a tapestry of cultures weaving together over millennia.
That's incredible. So this idea of Kenya being a melting pot, this mix of cultures, it goes way back. It's woven into the fabric of the nation.
It's part of Kenya's DNA, and it's visible everywhere, from the languages spoken to the traditions kept alive. It's a living, breathing history lesson, that's for sure.
I love that. And speaking of cultural fusion, can we talk about the Swahili coast? I was amazed to learn about these bustling trade cities that thrived long before any European powers even entered the picture.
Right. The Swahili coast is a testament to the often overlooked richness of African history. For centuries, it was this vibrant hub for international trade, connecting East Africa with the Arabian Peninsula, India, even as far as China. It wasn't just about exchanging goods, but also an incredible fusion of cultures and ideas.
It's amazing to think about the reach and influence they had all those centuries ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that legacy, still alive today. Look at the Swahili language itself, a beautiful blend of Bantu and Arabic, a living testament to that historical and cultural exchange.
It really makes you realize that there's always more to the story than meets the eye, and with Kenya, that seems to be true on so many levels. And of course, you can't talk about Kenya's story without addressing the elephant in the room, or should I say lion in the savannah, European colonialism. It's a complicated and often difficult subject, but crucial for understanding the Kenya we see today.
Right, it's a significant part of the narrative. While the Portuguese were the first Europeans to make contact way back in the 15th century, their influence was mostly limited to the coastal areas. It wasn't until the British came along in the 19th century that things really started to shift inland.
Yeah, and that shift brought about some pretty significant changes, didn't it? Like the construction of the Uganda Railway, for example. This massive infrastructure project cut right through Kenya, connecting it to the coast. What was the impact of that?
It was a double-edged sword, really. On the one hand, the railway was held up as a symbol of progress, a modern marvel, opening up trade routes, connecting Kenya to the global market, bringing in new technologies. But of course, progress often comes at a price.
That's usually the case, isn't it? We see those grand projects, and it's easy to overlook the other side of the story.
Exactly. And in this case, the construction of the railway resulted in displacement of communities, especially Maasai pastoralists, who relied on the land the railway now cut through. It disrupted traditional ways of life, and that fueled resentment towards British rule.
It's a classic example of how these large-scale projects, even those with good intentions, can have unintended consequences.
Absolutely. And those consequences played a role in what came next. The Mau Mau Uprising, a pivotal moment in Kenya's struggle for independence.
A period of intense struggle, to say the least. So, for those who aren't familiar, tell us a bit more about the Mau Mau Uprising and its significance.
Essentially, the Mau Mau, primarily Kikuyu fighters, rose up against British rule in the 1950s. This wasn't just about politics. It was about land rights, identity, the fundamental right to self-determination. Sadly, the uprising was met with brutal force, atrocities on both sides, a dark chapter in Kenyan history.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of colonialism, the scars that remain even today. And it's important to note that the desire for self-determination was there even before the Mau Mau Uprising.
Right.
There was the Somali referendum, where the Somali population in northern Kenya voted to become a part of Somalia.
Absolutely. And that referendum, sadly, was largely ignored by the British, a clear illustration of how colonial powers often prioritize their interests over the will of the people they governed.
It's a recurring theme in history, unfortunately. But ultimately, despite these struggles, Kenya did achieve independence in 1963. What were those early years like for the newly independent nation?
Well, Jomo Kenyatta, a pivotal figure in the independence movement, became Kenya's first president. He steered the nation through a period of monumental change, navigating that tricky transition from colonial rule to self-governance.
That's a huge task. Building a new nation from scratch comes with its own unique set of hurdles.
You can say that again. Like many newly independent nations, Kenya grappled with enormous challenges: ethnic tensions, economic disparities, and the ever-present shadow of corruption, all things that didn't disappear overnight with independence.
It sounds like an incredibly delicate balancing act. On the one hand, fulfilling the promises of independence, and on the other, addressing these deeply ingrained issues.
It certainly was. And after Kenyatta's death in 1978, Daniel Arap Moi stepped into the role of president. His rule, which lasted over 2 decades, initially operated under a single-party system.
And that, I'm guessing, had some pretty big implications for democracy.
It definitely shaped the political landscape during that time. However, things began to change in 1991 when Kenya transitioned to a multi-party democracy.
That sounds like a significant turning point.
It was a huge step toward greater political freedom and participation. The path to a stable multi-party democracy wasn't without its bumps, though.
Right, like the disputed elections and the ethnic violence that followed. It's mentioned quite prominently in Wikipedia.
Unfortunately, yes. The 2007 election in particular was deeply divisive, ultimately leading to a power-sharing agreement to quell the unrest. It exposed the fragility of peace and highlighted how crucial it is to address those deep societal divides.
A sobering thought, for sure. But it's also important to remember that in the midst of these challenges, Kenya achieved something truly remarkable: the ratification of a new constitution in 2010.
Absolutely. That new constitution marked a pivotal moment. It ushered in significant reforms, strengthening democratic institutions, promoting human rights, devolving power from the presidency, a huge step towards a more equitable and just society.
It speaks to the resilience of the Kenyan people, their determination to build a brighter future despite the obstacles. It's amazing when you think about it, right? From those early human ancestors to the ratification of a new constitution, it feels like Kenya is constantly evolving.
It is. It's a place that defies easy categorization. It's got this incredible blend of ancient traditions alongside this drive to be at the forefront of progress. So it makes it so fascinating.
It really is. So we've talked about the past, the challenges, the triumphs. Where does Kenya stand today in a global context? I mean, it's got to be more than just a tourist destination, right?
Well, absolutely. Kenya today is a fascinating blend of contrasts, really. On the one hand, it's a country experiencing significant economic growth. Tourism plays a major role, of course, but there's also agriculture, technology, all these sectors that are taking off.
That's good to hear. But at the same time, it's hard to ignore the other side of that coin. Challenges like poverty and corruption, which are still very real issues, right?
Right, and it's crucial to acknowledge those. Poverty remains a significant challenge, and corruption continues to hinder progress. But, and this is important, despite these challenges, there's this undeniable spirit of innovation and resilience in Kenya. You see it everywhere.
That's what I was thinking too. It's like you can sense that determination to carve out a brighter future.
Exactly. And they're not just talking about it, they're doing it. Look at Kenya's role in mobile technology, for example. They've been pioneers in mobile banking, completely revolutionizing financial inclusion. Companies like Safaricom are global success stories.
Wow, Safaricom. Now that's a name I recognize. It's incredible to see how they've leveraged technology to make such a tangible impact. So they're a great example of that innovation you're talking about. What about on other fronts? Are there any other examples that stand out?
Definitely. Think about environmental initiatives. Kenya was one of the first countries to implement a nationwide ban on single-use plastic bags.
Really? Wow, that's a bold move.
It was a bold move, and it shows their commitment to preserving their natural heritage.
So it's about more than just economic growth. It's about sustainable development, too.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing those long-term goals.
This has been a whirlwind tour. I feel like I've learned so much, but I also realize there's so much more to discover. So if we had to distill it down, what are the key takeaways about Kenya? The things that someone should remember?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is that Kenya defies simple explanations. It's a country of incredible diversity and dynamism, where the past is always in conversation with the present. It faces immense challenges, yes, but the resilience and determination of its people are truly remarkable.
I love that. Resilience and determination. It's not a fairy tale, but an ongoing story of a nation forging its own path. And that's what makes it so captivating to learn about.
Exactly. We've only scratched the surface with this deep dive. There's a whole world of knowledge out there waiting to be explored.
Well said. It's that sense of endless discovery that I love about these deep dives. It's not about memorizing facts and figures. It's about sparking curiosity, about wanting to learn more.
Couldn't agree more. And as we wrap up our exploration of Kenya, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Kenya has a young and rapidly growing population. What will the future hold for this dynamic nation as those generations come of age? It's a question worth pondering.
It really is. It's a story that's still being written, and I, for one, can't wait to see what unfolds. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the heart of Kenya.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time.